entitled Choose Your Humour Wisely and with Care. Please welcome Fred.
Sorry, can I just... Do you know how to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Sorry, thank you very much, Janet. Okay, oops. Okay, my mother told me that she thought being a parent was a career in itself. I personally believe that parents are entrepreneurs because you spend 9 months developing a product. And as soon as it comes out and you see what that product looks like, you give it a name, so you're branding it. Then you give it, anyway, my mum decided to call me Fred, short for Frederique, after my uncle Fred, because she thought it was funny that everyone should expect a boy and a little girl would turn up instead. Now, the only time my mother ever used my real name, Frederique, was when I was in trouble. So it would be, Frederique, viens ici, maintenant! Straight away I had to be there. So I went to boarding school. And luckily, or not, there was another girl called Fred, and she was the head girl. So I got summoned to speak to her. And apparently, the school wasn't big enough to have 2 Freds. You could have 2 Sarahs, you could have 2 Sallys, you could have 2 Janes, but not 2 Freds. So she asked me what I wanted to be called. I asked her if Fred was short for Frederique, like me, and she said, no, Deborah. Of course it was. It wasn't short for Frederique. So anyway, when my brother was 7, my mother, he came to see my mother and he said, look, I'm bored. So my mother said to him, go and knock your head against a wall. A few minutes later, my brother ran back into the kitchen and crying, and he said, I've done what you've told me and it hurts. Of course, my mother was basing it on my grandfather, who used to hit his head against a brick wall saying, God, what have I done to deserve this? 6 daughters and a wife. Anyway, so when my father was dying, my auntie, who hadn't seen for 25 years, came over to visit him. And she was standing in the doorway, and I noticed that my father was sitting looking at her up and down very slowly. And he said, Maureen, if I don't dead it, does that mean you'll want a refund? And of course, he did die, but she'd already gone back to Australia. And so I think you have to be very careful about how you choose your humour. But with my humour, I decided I'd do some stand-up. And on one particular gig, I walked in and I noticed that right at the back, there was a lot of young men. And in the front, there were girls with their boyfriends. Now, in my family, the one thing that was never a taboo was nudity. And my cousin actually told me a few years ago that she found it a nightmare living with us because she'd be having a shower or she'd be drying herself, and my brother and I would just come in and out. We wouldn't knock, we'd just in and out. And she felt it was really embarrassing. So, and I used to watch my father do the exercises in the nude. So I didn't think of it. And I chose this night to tell a story about a father, because I thought it was funny. I heard it when I was 12 years old, having a shower. And he noticed that his daughter was looking at him puzzled. And then she said, Daddy, why is it Mummy hasn't got a handle for her brush? With which I suddenly had a scream from the front row of a woman going, what? And then suddenly from right at the back, right up to the stage, a tidal wave of ice. Which is why I say to people, please choose your humour wisely and with care.
You must receive your applause.
Okay, receive.
And the judges. Annick. Now, Fred agreed a couple of hours before the event to do that.
Wow.
She wasn't really prepared, she just stepped in. You are awesome. Yesterday afternoon, we were sitting down in the garden in the IOD and we were doing a session together, and when she says, you know, she is about happiness and world peace, she's right. Like, her content is amazing. But here's what happened yesterday. We're going through the content, and in about 3 minutes, I started to like, whoa, this is heavy. So I said to Fred, at around 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, you need to get your first laugh in. Otherwise, the audience will be just really being content fatigued. You had your first laugh so quickly. I loved the story. To be honest, if it would be my choice, the whole story could just have been about you, Fred, the other Frederique in the boarding school. That would have been amazing. I think I would have loved that, to develop that more into a whole thing, because you mixed a lot of other stories in, which at some point I wasn't sure if I was following, but bringing in accents, you did this brilliantly. You know, your mom shouting in French, like, it's some of my favorite things, like when people really use those different elements to create more contrast in their speaking. So that was really awesome. My hardest stretch for Fred is, you ready for this? Just enjoy it. They loved it, they laughed. But when she's finished, she's like, you know, kind of like, oh God, was it good enough? You're awesome. Own it. Now. Promise?
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Good. That's the first time I've seen you properly deliver at all. And it was very entertaining, right?
Well, I don't know about that. But,
No, just, was it?
Yes.
There's your feedback. So let's switch off. She's like, right?
Sorry.
Come here. Stand here. Stop hiding. Come here. Good. Your power spot. So, just some stretches. Is you kind of do a little every now and then, you know. And that's okay if you're being gestury and there's roll, but then it either needs to be very intentional or not. So when you watch the video back, you'll see you kind of do this. And it's kind of like, why is she doing that? Like, unconsciously, it's like, what's going on there? And I think it might just be nerves. It's funny that you brought up that this is a stand-up routine, because I was going, she's delivering it like a comedian. She's kind of hitting us fast with punchlines. And then you said, oh, I did comedy. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. What, for me, just adding to what Anik was missing the thread, how you're going to lead us to the point you're going to get to. So maybe at the beginning go, open loop, listen guys, choose your choose your comedy wisely. Here's why. Take us on the stories, and then big finish, and then boom. Get it? Yay. The other thing I agree with as well is let loose. You know, if you're going to be funny. If they don't laugh, that's okay, but at least you have a great time. Not in a way that alienates us, but in a way that if we see you having a great time and having a crack at the jokes, right, then we're more likely to laugh with you. But because some of the punchlines are delivered awkwardly, we're a bit like, do we laugh? Do we not? Like, is that a joke? Or is she serious? Yeah, so let go, let loose, do some laughter yoga, right? And just have fun with it, and let's see that, because you're really good. You're articulate, you're funny, your energy's good. Get out of here. Yeah? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
You touched me.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. Yeah, you saying get out of your head.
Okay.
Yeah? Let's give another round of applause.